Continue.
So everybody, if you're not new, Peter, if you're new to these seminars, Peter helps us with adopt AI internally with our own firm and firms, and just general stuff, you know, from getting somebody outside your organisation to help. It's almost like prompting the humans, you know, to think, oh, hey, I'm asking for that, or asking this question into AI. So anyway, so from there we then went into, oh, well, why didn't we give this out to our customers and prospective customers in a wider format? So that's my relationship, or our BAT's relationship with Peter. And rather than a hard sell of BAT, it's basically Peter explaining how and getting users to be a little bit more positive about AI in general. Over to you, Peter.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks for that, Charlie. Yeah, just echoing what Charlie said, I guess the objectives really for me in these sessions are just to try and sort of educate you more in the AI tools that are available, and actually hopefully go away from each session with actually some skill or something you'd be interested to try that could actually make your job a little bit easier. Throughout this talk, if you have any questions at any point, literally just come off mute and ask them. If you don't want to come off mute, you could write in the chat, although I may miss it, so then someone will have to let me know. But really, don't worry about waiting for a certain time, and also don't worry about if you think it's a silly question. There's no such thing as a silly question. If you're thinking it, probably a load of other people are as well. Just a little bit of background about me. I've got a background in sort of applied machine learning from defense industry. I'm a scientist by training, and for the last sort of 4 years, I've been training data science and AI to corporate clients. Okay, so where are we in this series of webinars? This should be webinar 4. I think the first one we looked at sort of some definitions. What is machine learning? What is AI? What is the types of AI that we have? We then spent the last 2 webinars having a look at actually all of the features of these generative AI platforms like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Lovable, because many people, you should log into ChatGPT, you give it a basic prompt, yeah, it's rewritten that email for you, and you haven't used the full capabilities of these tools. Now, where we are on that journey today is, well, I'd call it deeper prompting with generative AI, because we talked about the features, but we haven't actually talked about in detail really how you can form the prompt or the input into the AI to really get the best output that you want. And there's definitely some prompt engineering hacks or tricks that you can play. And then also we're going to have a look at sort of deeper prompting, actually thinking about what the AI is doing to your workflow and where maybe it could be used and where maybe it shouldn't be used. What's coming up? We'll discuss some enterprise AI options, because hopefully at this point you're thinking, yes, AI is a really good thing. I want to bring it into my organization, and we'll have a look at the main ways that companies are doing that. And then moving on from that, I think the last 2 will be looking at AI agents, really what they are, and also strategically implementing AI in your business. Okay, now in terms of for today, I think I've already recapped where we are. That was the first point. So we'll have a look at these quick prompting techniques. These are these prompt engineering hacks, sort of ways that you can form your prompt in order to get the best output, probably to get that sort of extra 10% of quality out of your prompt. And then we will have a look at what I'm calling deeper prompting, so that relationship between how you're using the AI, how you're prompting it, and have a real think about where it should be used. Okay. So prompt engineering basics. Prompt engineering is this fancy word for effectively how you form your input into the generative AI model that you're using. Previously, you would just sort of write something into Google. There were some techniques you could use with Google to try to get the best outcome, but it was pretty limited. Whereas when it comes to generative AI, you can play all sorts of tricks in order to get the outcome that you want. Now, generally, I wouldn't overthink prompt engineering. Okay, some people claim to be masters of prompt engineering. You can go on like multi-day courses on prompt engineering. Generally, when you're giving a question or a task to the AI, just think about the kind of things and how you would phrase it, what information you give to a junior colleague who is new to your field and your organization. And then actually, in doing that, you will probably cover a lot of the prompt engineering techniques. For example, you should always give your AI some context. It does not necessarily know who you are. It doesn't know what you do. It doesn't know possible background information that's going to help with answering the question. So the first thing, yeah.
Hang on, Peter. If we've got a subscription to one of the services, surely it's learning from our questions.
So very recently, ChatGPT and now Anthropic Claude have introduced a memory feature. So often on these platforms, I'll just bring up my ChatGPT. Let's move that bar to you there. You will have, here is a new chat. Now, up until I'd say about last month, the memory feature wasn't actually activated, which means if you started a new chat, it had no information about your previous chats. Okay. Now the models are actually taking information from previous chats and actually using it, as Charlie said, to provide context as to what's going on. Now, you may have to, if you use ChatGPT, you may have to enable that memory. I don't think it's on by default, but that's a really good point, Charlie. Sometimes these bots are bringing context with them, okay? Once you've given it the context, be clear about the instruction. What do you want it to actually achieve? Like you would to a junior colleague, you're not going to let them guess what you actually want to do with the task. You provide clear, specific, and actionable instructions. The output. Don't wait until the chatbot has given you its output for you to then be like, oh, actually, it's too long or it's too short. The tone isn't quite right. Tell it up front. I want this to be short and concise, 2 paragraphs. Or actually, I want it to be 2,000 words. Okay, so define how you want the output to be. Otherwise, effectively, you end up having to do that on the 4th step, which is iterating. Never expect for some high quality output that the first output of the chatbot is exactly how you want it. You often take the output, read through it. You may challenge it on certain concepts. You may challenge it on certain facts. You may say, actually, no, the tone is too formal, the tone is too informal, and you will iterate to something that you want. Okay, so those are just some general rules before we go into the specifics. As Charlie did, do just interrupt me at any point if you have a question. So very quickly, so a basic prompt could be explain inflation to a client. That's not very good. A better prompt could be explain the context, who you are. You're a chartered financial planner advising Sarah. You could give the age if you want. She has this amount in savings. She's risk averse. What is it that we actually want? The instruction, clear professional advice, explaining inflation's specific impact on her situation and recommend practical protection strategies. Yep. How do you want that output? Executive summary, 30 words maximum. Some other things that could be useful for that output. And what have we got in the iterate and improve? Possibly the advice was too generic, so tell it to be a bit more specific. Maybe it was too technical, tell it to use simplified language. Maybe it's missing the urgency. Okay, so that is a really quick example. Now, I do on all of these points actually have a live chatbot in this presentation. I'm probably not going to demo this just because of time, but I'll demo a few as we go along. So, first technique, role-based prompting. This is actually one I do personally quite like. In role-based prompting, you assign a persona to the prompt effectively. You ask in your message the chatbot to behave like a certain character. Okay, you could, for example, ask it to act as a compliance officer, or you are a financial educator. What this will do is it will almost sort of get the chatbot in a frame of mind, a lens of the kind of things it thinks that kind of character will care about. So then when it goes to answer your response, it is likely to look at it in the lens of what it knows a compliance officer or a financial educator may be interested in. So this can be useful, for instance, if you're drafting some letters and you actually want, maybe you do want to have a persona, for instance, of a compliance officer, because you want to make sure that this letter to a client doesn't tread on any sort of compliance steps, or a financial educator, for instance. Now, where actually we did see this earlier on is actually CEOs were using it for quite clever use. When they had big speeches coming up, they were actually looking at the segments of the audience that would be interested in their speech. So that may be various sectors within their workforce, describing that sector to the workforce, and then asking the AI to critique it based on what that sector may be experiencing. Because often in large organizations, it's hard to imagine if you were a computer programmer or a computer scientist when you're the CEO. Whereas if you could describe to the AI, you're a computer scientist, you care about technical detail, all of these things, you may be able to get a heads up on where your speech may be actually falling short in the eyes of those kind of employees. And I think one CEO was effectively referring to it as sort of ask the AI to troll me as various characters. And then hopefully you don't get a sort of a Gerald Bratner experience where you say all of your products are bad. Okay, so actually practically, how do we do this? So again, we're using very simple, explain inflation to that client. That has no role to it at all.
Oh, no.
So was there a question there or just off mute? Okay, I think I'm just off mute. Okay, so you could say you're a senior compliance officer at the FCA, regulated wealth management. You've got 15 years of experience. So what that 15 years is telling the AI that actually you've got someone who knows what they're doing. So hopefully the AI is actually going to be more sort of grounded in some facts and rigor. You've got experience in regulatory oversight. You are to review all client-facing communications to ensure that they meet these various standards. And these are the things that you care about. You do not want to see exaggerated claims. You want to ensure balanced presentation of risks and opportunities and all these things that you would expect. And then you're going to get a critique, which is really focused on that. Okay. And you could maybe have a bank of these in a Word document or OneNote that you just copy and paste to various personas that you think is effectively your audience that you're concerned about often. And you can therefore get some critique on the work that you're doing in the eyes of those personas. So you could be a financial educator or another experienced IFA. Okay. Again, probably for time purposes, we won't demo that. But are there any questions on role-based prompting? Okay, it's a bit of a weird one, but actually it does work quite well. Chain of thought prompting. This is for easy prompts, easy questions, often just simple facts. Chain of thought is useless. But when you're asking problems of logic and maybe sort of maths, maybe you're trying to sort of ask a compound interest calculation, or Charlie's problem, how many cows will he have in 5 years based on how many die, how many breed and things like that. Often it's called chain of thought prompting, can help. This is where you guide the AI step by step through the expected process to effectively prevent it going off in a wrong direction and continuing down that line. So if I was to give a simple example, imagine that you wanted to calculate what would a client's portfolio look like based on the fact that in 2020, they had £10,000. In 2025, they had £100,000. What can I expect it to be in 30 years' time? Now, what we would hope the AI would do is work out, I guess, roughly the compound interest rate over that 5-year period, then take that compound interest rate and apply it to the value they have in 2025 and use that forward. However, we have no guarantee it will do that. It may use some sort of linear extrapolation. It may say, well, it went up by this amount in 5 years, so it's just going to continue straight and not use compound interest. Whereas in chain of thought, you would explicitly say, step one, work out the compound interest rate between 2020 and 2025. Step two, apply it to this calculation. Okay, and that gives you a lot more confidence that the logic that you're going to get back is actually achieving the task. Now, I should sort of be transparent about this. The more recent models, these reasoning models, actually have chain of thought reasoning almost inbuilt. So if you're working with quite an advanced model, you may actually not get too much return from using chain of thought, because it was realized it was a really good technique about sort of 12 to 18 months ago. So actually the AI companies actually started to train using that technique of step-by-step logic produces better quality answers in the end. Okay. Probably just for time, we'll skip past that one. Let's have a look at few shot prompting. Another quick, easy example. If you are wanting an expected output, often in an expectable way, maybe a good example could be emails. You would like a bot to deal with a lot of your email responses, writing in the kind of style that you're writing. Now, one of the techniques you could use is give it maybe 5 email responses that are typical to the way that you respond in. Then ask the AI, now respond to this new email in the style that I typically do. Now, hopefully what the AI is going to do is realize that actually you start off with a pleasantry, you then get on to the purpose, and then you summarize. Or it's hoping to see some common points in the way that you respond to your emails and whatnot. Now, as Charlie was actually pointing out, the memory feature on these AI tools is actually probably doing a little bit of this few shot prompting. In the memory, it has sort of worked out how you like to respond to stuff. So for instance, if Charlie was putting in like how he responds to emails, I'd say it's pretty minimal, just straight to the facts and sign off. So that is how you could use few shot prompting if you want something to sound very much like you. You can go a bit further on few shot prompting. It's called context over examples. So as well as giving some examples as to how you want the output to look, you can also explain what's key about those outputs. Again, so maybe I'm giving it 5 of my emails. These are the examples of my emails. AI, pay particular attention to the fact that I never start with, I hope you are well, for instance, because that is often a common way that emails start. So you could point out key things that you want the AI to pay attention to in these examples that you want it to learn from as it writes the response to your email. Or maybe the last 2 newsletters that you've written for your company, paste those in. I would like something in the same style, the same tone, pay particular attention to the structure. Okay. What have we got here as an example? Categorize this client's feedback. The quarterly review was helpful and clear. We haven't given any example really of how we wanted it actually to be categorized. This is quite a simple example, to be honest. Then we have categorized the client feedback into positive, neutral, negative, or urgent, and we've given some examples of the kind of output that we want, and now categorize this new sentence. Okay, so it's quite easy to apply, relatively simple. Just looking at the clock. Let's just go off on that one. Okay, meta prompting. Asking AI to help you prompt. I think this is a really powerful technique, and it means you don't really have to pay attention to anything that we did before. AI in the last 2 years has become pretty good at trying to understand what we mean when we give it minimal information. Okay, so what you could do is actually just ask the AI to improve this prompt for me. And the chances are it's going to output something that is probably a lot better than what you had initially going in. Now, I use this actually a lot in domains that I am less familiar with. So for instance, if I'm working with text to image, which I don't use too much, so generating images from text, there are certain phrases and styles that image models like to use in their prompts that you typically don't have in text-to-text prompts. For instance, they often talk about wide-angle lenses, photorealistic, well-lit. These are all key terms that these text-to-image models seem to respond well to that I'm just not aware of. So if I was actually prompting a text-to-image model, I'd first go in and say, could you suggest a prompt for a corporate setting with people sitting around a table, and it's actually going to improve that for me. Now, the other approach to that, rather than just asking, how can you improve this prompt, is actually, let me find the slide for this. No. Okay, you can actually ask it to ask you questions to improve your prompt. Okay, so for example, let's say you're writing a letter to your boss asking for a pay rise. What you could do is say to the AI, I'm writing a letter to my boss requesting a pay rise. What information do you need in order to complete this prompt for me? And it will probably say, how long have you been at the company? What projects have you been working on? What ROI have you achieved? And in that way, the AI is collecting all the information from you rather than you having to give it up front. Okay, and the AIs are pretty good at doing this. So my example here with, so Midjourney is a specific AI for text to image. A bad example would be, give me a professional financial advisor in an office. My meta prompt would be, improve this Midjourney prompt with style parameters, and it's likely to give me something like this: professional financial advisor, gives the age. Now I could change that if I want. These words like confident, these models seem to like this kind of stuff. And in image models, I just wouldn't be aware of it. Natural lighting, shallow depth of field. Okay, so if you really want to improve your output, not quite sure how to do it, just ask the AI how to improve your prompt. Okay. And I think, again, for time purposes, we will skip on that one. Okay, any questions so far with these prompt engineering tips and hacks?
Well, I can tell you after you.
I was just going to say, when you ask to ask questions, we've always found it better to say ask questions one by one. Otherwise, you get a list of questions and it gets all very confused. By doing it one by one, it seems to get a better response.
Yeah, brilliant, Adrian. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can give it too much information at once and you do get that confusion. Also, sometimes it's hard to sort of remember all of its list as you're typing away. So yeah, very good point. And like Adrian's done, if you have any sort of experiences of your own to share, then that's great with improvements. Sorry, Charlie, you had a question, I think.
What you were saying, you should personalize it. I just checked the settings on my own setting. And at the end of that process, linked in a couple of things while you were talking. And then put in one of our most common questions at BAT, which is how to set up two-factor authentication. And I'm embarrassed to say, I mean, just the answer's better than we could have produced ourselves. And it's amazing. That's just amazing.
Get that in on your FAQ box then.
Yes, I mean, it's just amazing. You don't, almost like you don't need an FAQs in your on your own system. Because ChatGPT can do it for you. Anyway, sorry, it's a diversion.
No, it's a valid point. I mean, often what we're finding is sort of 90% of the task can be done well. It's the 10% that we just can't trust. And can we get away with that 10% we don't trust? Probably not at the moment. The next few hacks and tips are all about trying to get AI to sound a bit less AI-like. Because we've all been around probably for a good 2 years where we've been experiencing this AI content. And there definitely is a reaction, and we'll go on to this more, into reading AI content. Sometimes you think, oh, it's probably not as good. You recognize certain phrases. It all comes a bit generic because actually that's the way that the algorithms were trained. They were trained actually to produce the most probable, the most statistically likely, and therefore the most generic content. So the next little hacks are going to be how can you try to steer the AI out of that generic content to make your material still more engaging. So the first of that is often we tell AI what to do. We can also tell it not what not to do, and that's a negative style guide. So there may be a series of words that you have identified yourself with just not liking, or you associate with AI, and therefore you don't actually want to see them in the AI generated work that you do. Anyone got any particular pet peeves on AI words that seem to be coming up and they don't like? Or words tells for them that they know now this content is probably AI generated? So I think, Oliver, you may be talking to us, but we can't hear you.
I don't think that was a question.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yes, smashing.
Perfect. Yeah, it's the wrong one. So we use Copilot, but there's a couple of bits like it seems to say I really appreciate it. Something, yeah, if it's helped you, and I really appreciate it. It could be quite over.
Yeah, I think I got most of that. It is very polite, and it's I appreciate this, and it is there are some terms like that, and you have to think about in the piece of work that you're putting out what the audience reaction may be to that. And actually they may think, oh, it's just another bit of AI slop, which is the term going around. So if that's the case, then you don't want to see the word appreciate in this content. Okay. You could just put a list of banned words. For me, I do a lot of work of sort of proof of concept AI stuff and then have to do like a business case for it. And it loves giving revolutionary. This work is revolutionary. Other words, I'm surprised I haven't got it on my list, is delve. Let's delve deeper into this. I've never used the word delve actually personally before, but it's now everywhere in AI. And there's a few papers that talk about these words. Also, formatting. AI definitely has a way of formatting. It uses bullet points far more frequently than I think we did before the AI or generative AI era. Numbered lists for everything. It uses dashes a lot, hyphens a lot. So again, you may want to say don't use that. And it often likes to over summarize, in my opinion. Has a point, summarizes a paragraph all too frequently. And you can again introduce some bad phrases that you generically don't like because you associate them with AI. Okay, so nice and easy to do. Helps just move your content out from being a bit too AI generic. Now, in some places, well, generally when you use AI for a discussion, they have been fine-tuned not to be too decisive. The AI companies don't want them to be too decisive. So they often give a very balanced argument. It's a bit like the BBC. And that can be useful, but equally, in some cases, if you want a critical discussion about strategy, you do want it to almost take a side. So therefore, number one, we have to be aware that it is going to try to give a balanced argument. And then you may want to try to force it down one path to be a bit less just sitting on the fence. Now, one of the ways that you can do that is a steel manning technique. Effectively, you ask the AI to recognize that there will be multiple positions and write the strongest possible argument it can for each position, and then argue it vigorously with itself, and then give you actually a decisive result. Now, obviously, you only want to do this on topics where you do want that decisive decision that you've made, sort of the positive and negative, you are aware of it. But if you actually do want it to steer one way or the other, just be aware you have to kind of force it that way. Okay. Let's actually have a look at one of these. So let's see, what's the Steelman argument? Few short self-critique, forced divergence. So should a 30-year-old prioritize a pension or ISA contributions? Let's have a look at what the AI wants to do with that one. Okay, let's just. So it depends on several factors. It's given the advantages of a pension, given the advantages of the ISA, factors to consider, and there we go. A balanced approach could be beneficial, which that may be true, but if you really want it to take a side, let's force it down that road. Let's open that up a bit so we can see it. So options, stock shares, ISA, cash ISA, or a LISA. Make the strongest possible argument for each. Pick one, argue it vigorously, and do not hedge. And hopefully we should ask it, we should find it actually comes off the fence. Again, be careful because you don't, obviously, it is just the AI statistical model.
I can see this being very popular with SJP advisors. Choose from a narrow select list of SJP funds, please.
I see. Okay. Yes, and then claiming that it was the AI that just it wasn't forced down that route. So it's decided in that case the stocks and shares ISA. Okay, good. Moving on. Cliche burn down, quite similar actually to that whole the negative prompting guide. There's certain phrases now, certain sentences that seem to appear a lot. You can add that to your list of stuff that you do not want to appear. However, often the kind of phrases are actually quite specific to the domains that you work in. So what you could ask for first is list 10 common cliches in financial advice writing if what you are writing is about financial advice. Now, these are the phrases that statistically are going to be most probable to come up in financial advice. And these are the things that you don't want to be there because people are getting fed up with seeing them. Okay, so you could ask it to list those 10 things first, get them out in the open, and then when it goes on to do your writing, it is going to therefore hopefully not include these things. And therefore you'll get something that seems a bit more unique than generic AI material. Okay, again, these are just little tips, nothing groundbreaking at this point. The AI self-critique is another reasonable strategy to try to get the best possible output, the best possible intelligence out of the system. So you could ask it a prompt first, get that output. You could copy that output, and this actually is where Charlie memory becomes a bit annoying on models. If you then started a new prompt and asked the AI to evaluate its response, it knows it's already responded, and therefore it's not going to be as critical on the response that you give it. So if you took a prompt, OpenAI, ChatGPT responds to it, the technique is effectively copy that response, paste it into a new chat, and say, could you rate the quality of this response and improve upon it? Without memory, it is going to look for critical things in that response and try to improve on it. With memory, it is likely to be easier on itself because it knew it just produced it. So we're just adding diversity in, effectively by starting a new prompt, you get a new bit of randomness. An even better technique would be actually to take the output of whatever you were prompting, the output, and paste it into another model, asking for it to critique it. And you can actually do some clever tricks here. You could ask it to generate a marking rubric for itself on what you would expect the quality of this output to be assessed by. Ask it to mark itself, identify where it feels it's weak, and then improve upon that. Okay. And again, these is just squeezing out the sort of the last couple of percent in the quality of the work that you get. So you can do it in the same model, the same platform, but it's even better to maybe go off to Grok, go up to Gemini, go to Claude. They all have free options if you really want to get the best piece of work out of your models. Okay. Good. So we're now moving over into what I would call deeper prompting techniques. So no longer these prompt engineering hacks, but I will pause. Any questions on these prompt engineering hacks? No? Okay. So workflow order can matter. When you're using AI for a task, being critical about the position that you use AI in the task and its effect on the output is worth thinking about. So if you were to take a piece of writing, maybe a bit of writing for your website, maybe a response to a letter, if you let the AI come out with the very first draft with minimal information, and then you go to edit that draft, it is likely that you are going to be anchored by the first draft that the AI's had. And it can be quite difficult, even if you sort of amend certain sentences, to fully get back to the kind of voice, the kind of way that you write. And then the end result can be some work. This is not actually your best. It's not the way that you like to write because the AI kind of took over and you could not steer it back. So in that case, I would actually probably suggest you come out, if you know what you want to write a very rough first draft yourself, then get the AI to build on it. Because then it still has all of your original ideas, the phrases that you like to use, and then almost get the AI to build it out, and then have a look at what the AI has produced. Now, there are some cases where actually AI first makes perfect sense. So if you're completely unfamiliar on a topic and just want to brainstorm some ideas, you don't have the ideas to start with. So therefore, it makes sense that you brainstorm. But actually, when a lot of researchers have found, and I find this myself, if you're writing something of importance, do actually start with your own writing first. So for instance, if these were the facts about this client or this newsletter that you wanted to put out, key facts about the ISA, the allowance, the junior ISA limits, all of this, write the draft with the facts that you want in there first, and then ask the AI to write the newsletter based on that. So a bad approach would be write a section explaining the ISA options to 2024, 2025. The AI may output something, and then you are going to have to go through it, changing it, moving some things around, getting rid of that section, that's irrelevant. It would have probably been better to start with just to say, these are the things that I actually want in it. This is the way that I write. Now give me a first draft. Okay, let's see the example we have. So yeah, you're giving it more of the detail of what you want in it. And then effectively the prompt is to polish it off, rarely finish it, but ensuring you keep that direct tone, you keep that structure, you keep a lot of the things that I value in my own writing. Okay. I'm interested, has anyone else found, because I personally found initially, probably when AI was getting good, I was like, I'm just going to let it write a lot of my own stuff. And actually I found I was having to roll back on so much of what it produced. I actually go back to now at least writing, not caring too much about the spelling or grammar, getting my own input down first. Has anyone else found a similar experience, or they actually find first drafts of writing okay with AI?
No, I'd agree with that, Pete. It's, you know, that's how things happen to me. If I chuck it first into AI, there's a lot of editing to do afterwards.
Yeah, Yeah, and I thought, and sometimes you just
I think for me personally, where it works best first time round is where, as you said, it's not something that you've got a lot of knowledge on. You want to get a framework for a policy or something like that. Then you can use that as a starting point and can build from there. But yeah, I think when it's something that you're trying to stylize, it's really important to put in more information and give it some direction first of all.
Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, I just find sometimes you can be hard to get it back once the AI has drafted it for the first time. Brilliant. AI in the right place at the right time. So this, to a certain degree, is opinion based, and it really depends on what you're looking to achieve with your AI generated work. So I think generally AI works well with just standard information transfer. If you're not too concerned about how the content is coming across, you just want that email back with this information, that's fine. Brainstorming, generally stuff where efficiency is the goal, I find AI okay. However, when we're actually looking for something a little bit more than efficiency, we can run into some subtleties. So if you think that the person receiving that AI material is going to respond differently to it because it's AI material, then we need to have a deeper thought about, are we using AI in the right way? Now, I experienced this. It was quite nice to reflect. This was a workshop about 18 months ago, got some really nice feedback. I worked with this chap for about 2 years. It was the end of the course, and everything that he'd written in the feedback was actually factually correct. I'd helped him at the weekends. We'd kind of gone above and beyond, and it was really nice to read. And then I looked at it again, and some of those phrases were coming out, and it was clearly AI written. It was factually correct, but it was AI written. And just emotionally, it took the edge off it. It didn't feel quite as good a feedback as if I hadn't recognized it was AI material. Now, in some situations, that's completely fine. But if you're really trying to build that human, that client relationship, I would be very aware of the user recognizing that this could be AI and how they may respond and react to it as a result. Okay, now here we've got a point. So sometimes the process is actually the message itself in a way. There was a great example from a professor in the US who does a lot of sort of how AI interacts with people research. And he gave a good example of giving a reference. So he teaches a lot of students, they go off, look for jobs, and then students or the employers ask for a reference. Now, he says he could get the AI to write quite a reasonable reference. Or he could spend 30 minutes, maybe even 60 minutes, going back through the students' notes, remembering the experiences, remembering the positives about that student, all of the good, unique skills they had, and write a nice referee letter. Now, you could get similar letters, but in his opinion, the idea of having a professor be the referee to that employer is that this professor has taken 30 minutes to 60 minutes of their time effectively to back that person. So almost the fact that time was given to the work becomes part of the message. If the employer had just recognized the fact this is AI content, how difficult is it for that professor to write that? It's 30 seconds. They may think, well, actually, how much do they back that student? Whereas if this professor has actually spent a good hour of their time out of their day, where I'm sure they could have been doing something else, they clearly do have some confidence. So reflect on the tasks that you do in your work where this could be a factor, and you don't want it therefore to degrade that relationship or degrade the meaning of what you're trying to achieve. Okay. Again, this is sort of quite situation dependent. Has anyone got any sort of experiences they could share of where they think this could be relevant in the work that you do? No? Okay, that's fine. What have I got under simple questions to ask? Okay, yeah, is it just sort of simple information transfer, like quick email back? Yeah, AI is fine. Technical work, often brainstorming ideas, that's generally fine. Where if it's relationship building, really consider that individual. Like, do you think they're going to receive AI well? Do you think they're not? So really consider that human element. Demonstrating that commitment. If you think that yes, that person is going to appreciate the fact that this has been handwritten and therefore that adds to the goal you're trying to achieve, then yeah, you should probably rein back a little with the AI. And if you're learning a new concept as well, we'll go on to this in sort of the cognitive effects. The sort of effort of the process of researching is actually the point of the task. And we're seeing this a lot in education, and I'm very much involved in this with students. The output often is not why you're doing the task, it is the process, which is why you're doing the task. And therefore using AI on those kind of things is therefore a little bit pointless. Okay, so again, think hard about what you're trying to achieve with your task and is it the right place for AI. Let's quickly talk a little bit about hallucinations. So for those of you who don't know, hallucinations is a term used. It's actually now outdated. I think we're supposed to use the word ungrounded now, according to Google and Microsoft. It's basically when the AI makes up stuff that isn't true. Now, the reason it usually makes stuff up that isn't true is because it doesn't have the context or the knowledge to actually answer truthfully. In which case, it wants to try to please us is the general rule, so it will try to get away with making stuff up. Hallucinations are actually inherent to the way these models are trained. They get rewards effectively for when they have a suitable, correct answer. They get penalized if they don't have the right answer, but there's no real incentive for the model to say, actually, I don't know. So as a result, it's a bit like those multiple choices where you don't get penalized for the wrong answer. The AI may as well try and make something up that sounds plausible, and it may get a reward signal back. And therefore, they inherent into these models is this feature that they are susceptible to making things up. Now, I should point out the hallucination rate, so the ability for these AIs to make things up is going down and down and down. My presentation is out of date. I've got GPT-4 and 3.5. We're now in GPT-5 and Claude 4.5. Hallucinations are getting less and less, but they are still there and they are still very much problematic because it means they make stuff up. Case in the news recently, Deloitte being sued by the Australian government for a piece of work last year where it had loads of made up references in the, I think it was a £500,000 piece of work that Deloitte had charged. And quite rightly, the Australian government are saying, we want our money back because clearly this is just chatbot created. And there's other examples that you can find. There are certain areas where you're more likely to get hallucinations. If you're asking for very specific contexts, you're more likely to see hallucinations. So very specific events, often recent events, you're likely to see it. So things that aren't that common, you're more likely to get that hallucinations. Now, I'm not going to go through this just because of time. How to generally avoid hallucinations. Where possible, try to give it as many facts as possible. If you give it the facts, it's not going to make stuff up. Do tell it not to make stuff up. Tell it it's okay if you don't know to not make stuff up. The onus is on you. If it's very critical information there, you should be checking it. Ask the AI to use web search if it's relevant for especially new material. I was having a conversation with Claude shortly after the Charlie Kirk incident about, I didn't really know much about Charlie Kirk, and I was asking about it, and I made some reference to the fact that he was now dead, and Claude said, no, he's alive and well. These AI tools should have effectively a triage system, but when it's trying to assess if your prompt requires recent knowledge, it should do a web research. But it sort of made sense. It had no reason to think that Charlie Kirk was dead, so therefore it didn't really decide to go and do a web search. It just told me he wasn't dead. When I said, actually, no, you're wrong, it then went out to the internet to check it. So if you know that your question, maybe it's about some compliance documentation, is going to need some relevant, up-to-date stuff, do just directly say, go out to the web and find it. As well, limit the scope. If you're asking for the AI to produce loads and loads of knowledge in one go, you're more likely to get hallucination. Whereas if you limit it, maybe just give me this opening paragraph, you're less likely to get it. Okay, I am speeding up because I'm conscious of time. Confused context. This is definitely something to be aware of if you're bringing AI into your organization and you're using AI tools that have access to your organization's file systems. The assumption is I've got AI, it's connected to my SharePoint or OneDrive, so therefore it has information to all of the policies and whatnot, so therefore I can ask it stuff and it will give me the exact information back. I've worked in or consulted for a lot of organizations. Not one of them has good data structures, good data documentation, good data deletion policies. Data is all over the place. When these large language models connect to these SharePoints, there's often contradictory information there. There's about 10 different versions of the HR policy. The HR policy contradicts the maternity leave policy. So when you ask a question about how many days am I entitled to after my maternity leave, it may be pulling the information from the wrong policy. So just be aware, if you're bringing information in, if you're connecting AI to your enterprise file store, it's only as good as the context and the clarity of the context and documents that you give it. Okay. Okay, 8 minutes. Let's move past that. Confused context, we've done. We'll skip over randomness, I think. And certainty illusion. Not too much to say, but something to be aware of. AIs do have this tendency to talk in such a confident manner. They never seem to give you an answer of, I think it could be this, I'm not entirely sure. The reason being, when they were trained with human reinforcement learning, humans said we didn't like the fact that you're a bit not sure of your answer. So they've learned the fact that we like to see clarity, confidence in our responses. So therefore, when you ask it a question, it can be very confident that it has the right answer. And this can be deceptive to you when you're trying to understand it. It must be right because it just feels so right in the way it's writing. Do not get drawn into that. That is just the way these models have been designed. Obviously, if there's facts on there that are critical, the AI may still have got it wrong. So don't get sort of caught up in this certainty illusion.
One other question on that, Pete, because one of the things I found is that AI will turn conjecture into fact. And so it's, looking at sources of information which are saying we think this or that might be a solution, and saying, well, actually, that is the solution. How can we avoid that?
That's a good question. So you could actually just in your prompt ask the AI to rate its certainty. So say, I'm giving you lots of information. I'm not asking you to be like, to give me something decisive. Give me a scale of 1 to 10 of how confident you are in this information. And then the AI can be certain in its confidence. So it can deliver itself well still in the way it's been trained, but actually I only have a 6 out of 10 confidence in what I've told you. So that could be a way around that. So that's a very good question.
Good answer.
Thank you. Happens every now and then.
Well,
Cognitive costs of AI delegation. This is probably worth thinking about. So a lot of organizations at the moment, we're on Teams at the moment, it's being recorded, transcripts are being produced, and you get summaries, and these summaries are almost being a replacement for your own notes. and they're definitely being used to therefore make for you to quickly read through, and maybe you won't go to the meeting itself, which seems quite an efficient way of doing things. However, we do have to consider there is, let's say, writing your own notes. You're not just writing your own notes as a way of recording the meeting. There are other things that are going on there. And I'd like you possibly to reflect, if you are using transcripts, on what is actually going on. And I'll give you an example. It's actually, my wife's a GP, and I talk to a lot of GPs of what's been going on for them with medical scribes. So a medical scribe, it records the consultation between doctor and patient, and then once the meeting is finished, the AI produces the notes for the doctor, and they can amend them. Now, the first thing that she began to find was, because she knew that her notes were majority being written this way, she started to use a load of technical jargon during the consultation. Okay, well, they've been taught for whatever 10, 15 years of medical school is the way that we consult is not to use technical jargon in front of the patient. It will make them feel uneasy when you talk about all of these words like DEXA scan 5000 or whatever. The patient feels uneasy, they don't know what's going on, but she started to use them so that they would appear in the summary notes and be less work for her. And then she was like, well, actually, these consultations are not going on as well. So that was the first potential unexpected consequence of this simple AI task that was actually changing her behavior. Other things that she found, we've talked about hallucinations. The AI was starting to hallucinate things in the notes that were not there in the transcript. A simple example that we found actually in trying this together, I acted as the patient. I reported a knee pain, which is common for me from a lot of running. It was quite a short consultation. What it put in the notes was, doctor suggested rest, ice, compression, elevation. Well, that is pretty much common for any musculoskeletal niggle, so to speak. She never said that. Okay, so to start with, now she's having to scrutinize the notes a bit more. Fair enough, she should, but she's not trusting AI notes that have been generated by colleagues because they could have been hallucinating. So now she's beginning to question the medical information that's coming into her. Maybe she's going to actually, instead of just building on top of what another doctor's done, actually ask it if she thinks AI notes have been used. The final example, doctors who have been using this are finding that actually they're remembering patient consultations not as well because they're no longer having to take those manual notes. Those manual notes were not just there as a record. What was going on in your brain was actually you were reflecting on that consultation more, you have a better memory of it, and actually they were coming up with sort of second order decisions of, oh, actually I shouldn't have said that, I need to follow up on that. Or actually, oh, now I've written that they have these symptoms, could it be this? And they were missing out on all those goodies that happened from that manual process of taking their own notes. So as much as I'm obviously very AI positive, I like to bring in AI. Let's reflect on the tasks we are delegating to AI and what are we losing from them, and just be critical about that. Okay.
2 minutes.
Go on.
We've only got 2 minutes left. Sorry.
Now,
We've got to finish on time.
The last point we'll talk about is 60 seconds. AI sycophancy. AI has a tendency to basically just agree with you. Again, this has happened in the way it's been trained. So if you potentially come up, this is my new business plan, I'm really taken to it, could you critique it? It's probably going to say, actually, this is a really good business plan. Just be aware of that sycophancy. I had a colleague on a course who I'd questioned, is this the right way of doing something? She'd pasted that into, I think it was Perplexity, said, this is the way I've done it. Do you think it's the right way of doing it? And the AI just agreed with her with no real backing to it. So if you want the AI to be critical, just make sure in your prompt you tell it, be critical. I don't mind negative advice. Give me the negative points and the positive points. Otherwise, it's going to be quite sycophantic and say that you are great. That is the end. I got there in a little bit of a rush. Apologies for that, Charlie, but hopefully that that was a useful session, hopefully. I think I'm stuck. I think the screen's stuck. It's not going to the summary page, but I don't have time for the summary page anyway. yeah,
I think it's fantastic. I mean, for us, it saves us an amazing amount of time just with the team, just to have us £20 a month per user subscription with OpenAI in our case. Do you have a preferred subscription? I mean, there's several different 5 or 6 models. Do you have a preferred one, Peter? Do you personally?
So I obviously like Anthropic Claude just because I use it for a lot of programming, a lot of development, and I think it just has the edge for me. But if someone took away Claude, I'd be really happy with ChatGPT as well. Yes.